I'm Taylor and I'm here with Adrian from One Agency, and we're going to be interviewing Ben Stubbs from Ben the Snake Catcher.
Ben, we're getting into we're well into the warmer months now. We know that reptiles are fairly active, in particular snakes, in the warmer weather. So what I'd like to find out from you today is some important things about what you should do when you see a snake, who to go to, who to call. Obviously you're a snake catcher, so that's pretty obvious. But I've got a couple of questions I want to ask you now. We know that Sunbury and the Macedon Ranges, there's plenty of snakes around. We also know one of the most important things is that they have an active role to play within our environment, okay, and that they are part of a food chain that people very rarely consider. So today we're in the wetlands, we're in Emu Bottom. It's probably an area where you are very likely to encounter a snake if you're out walking your dog.
Correct.
What should you do, what shouldn't you do?
Look, if we're here at Emu Bottom and you encounter a snake, most people have a dog with them. First thing, chuck your dog on the lead. That's as simple as it is an off-lead area. So get your dog on the lead, and then literally all you have to do is keep your distance. Especially with a dog with you, fair way back, 10-15 metres would be nice, and you can watch that snake, enjoy it, cruise through the wetlands. They are quite pretty animals if you stop and actually appreciate them. And literally that's all you have to do. Give it space, and that's it.
So if you're in the wetlands, there's no need to really call you because
Correct.
they're in their natural habitat.
Have had calls for here, and I will tell you pretty quickly that there's no point, and you just need to give it a bit of space. You're in its property when we're talking about real estate.
Now, Sunbury in particular, but Macedon Ranges in general, what type of snakes are we likely to encounter?
So the three main snakes we'll encounter eastern brown snake, which most people know about, tiger snake, again pretty popular. People know about tigers, and the lowlands copperhead. So the copperhead is one people get surprised by a little bit more, and the one that gets mistaken for red-bellied black snakes pretty regularly. They have similar colorations to red bellies, but we don't actually get red-bellied black snakes in the area. So eastern browns are probably the most common in the Sunbury area, but then as you move into the Macedon Ranges, it's more lowland copperheads and tigers, but we do get both those species in the Sunbury area as well.
Okay. And what part of Sunbury do you receive call-outs most?
I don't think there's anywhere particularly dominant. Like I've probably been in most streets, I reckon, that have any sort of habitat nearby. There's a few little pockets in the main street and things like that we don't get calls for, but there's really not much space for a snake to be. But yeah, all of our new estates, we're building them in lovely, beautiful areas because we want to live here, and just so happens that our wildlife has lived here and still enjoys living here.
So, and a lot of that would be disturbing them, so you could find that they're on the move when they're excavating. And
that's part of it, yeah. So we do rip up a fair bit of land and stuff as we build property, and yeah, we do disturb them. But most of my call-outs tend to be people who they're just cruising through their backyard, and they do stumble across a snake in their backyard, which is not ideal. But if we don't have kids or dogs or cats outside, we can actually just let the snake keep moving.
Well, Sunbury's actually a pretty green area, per se, as a suburb. And there's a lot of parks and reserves all the way through. And some of the places in Sunbury and the Macedon Ranges that we enjoy the most are places like the wetlands, the Nook, and plenty of the reserves that are around there. Some of them have water, creeks and reeds coming through them. Some of them have got Jackson's Creek going through it. So it's obviously that's a habitat that we're going to see them. But in your backyard, if you're going to encounter one in your backyard, where are you most likely to find it in your backyard?
Specifically, well, a lot of people will only see them when they're out in the open. I don't think people realise how many snakes probably do move through their properties unseen, because that's what they're really good at doing. They're not an animal that enjoys being seen by large predators, which in their mind is what we are. We may not eat them, but they think we will. But usually they'll be travelling along up against walls or just under vegetation, because they like to feel still sheltered. You will get them cruising across grass, but they tend to be doing that quite quickly, and they don't tend to stop, because that for them is a pretty exposed area for them. So I always recommend, especially after the warmer weather, as it cools down in the evening, to go out before you let your dog out or you let the kids go out for a run, because there's a high chance the snakes have done exactly what you've done and gone, okay, the hot weather's gone, that's really nice, it's a little bit cooler, they come out and enjoy the time as well.
Okay, so just on that, most people interpret snakes to be active when it's really, really warm.
Yep.
Right, so what you're telling me is that there's only a certain temperature range that they're really, really active in.
Yeah, correct. So reptiles in general are ectothermic, which means they need to warm themselves or cool themselves by using the environment, whether that's the sun or warm concrete or things like that. So snakes, you're probably going to find they want a body temperature anywhere from 24 to say maximum 32 degrees, especially for the species down here. 32 being a very, very top end. If they're at that, they're going to be looking for somewhere to cool down. So when we get these really, really hot days, anything over 30 degrees, I tend to not get a lot of calls in the middle of the day unless it's in a sheltered area. Once we start heading into those much warmer days, the thing that everyone's always concerned about is snakes in the house. Not overly common, but when it does happen, tends to be on those warmer days because they're looking for the air conditioning as much as we are.
And I suppose just on that, Ben, what should someone do if they do see a snake in their house or in the surrounds?
In the house is really easy. The room it's in, you shut the door or any exits to it. You roll up damp towels, push them against the door. I recommend having a shoe on when you do it and just push it against the door to cover those cracks in the door and then call your snake catcher. You don't need to open the door again to check he's still there. You're not the one that's going to be going looking for it. The snake catcher will do that, whether that's me or someone else. If it's in your backyard, I always ask someone, is it a problem? I think there's a mindset now that if you see a snake, you must call a snake catcher. Not necessarily the case. I don't attend every house. I had a call yesterday. Someone had one near their house and I said, okay, do you have kids? Do you have a dog? Someone who's going to go annoy that snake? She said no. And I said, okay, he's probably going to move on if he gets somewhere where you're feeling very concerned about it, but otherwise we can leave them be. They will move on, keep having a good day, and we can have a good day as well. So as long as you keep an eye on it, if you're planning to have it removed from a distance, you need to be 4 or 5 meters back from that animal and you can watch it quite safely. There is no risk to you at all.
Now they have a really important part to play in our ecological system. So obviously you're a snake catcher, right? So you're not a snake killer, you're an actual snake catcher, right? So you're primarily there to relocate the snake. Correct. Okay, so when relocating the snake, you're just returning it to its normal environment?
Yeah, so I have to be really careful where I return them. Especially in built up areas like this, I need to return them somewhere somewhat close to where I caught them. Displacing them a long distance is really, really bad for them and they probably won't survive. But I can't just go to a paddock and dump them in the paddock because there's no cover for them, it's not a habitat. So I have to be pretty specific where I take them, and I don't take them all to the one spot because snakes do eat snakes. So I probably just end up with one really large one. But we need to look at what habitat is that species found there. So if I was to catch a tiger on one side of Sunbury, there's certain areas of Sunbury I couldn't drive it to and release it because we don't find tiger snakes there and he's probably just going to have a pretty ordinary day. So that's a really important part of a snake catcher's job is knowing the snakes, their habitat, their behaviour, what they require to live before we release them, because just dumping them into any random reserve is going to cause multiple issues.
Why are they so important to the environment?
So snakes are really important. They control a lot of our smaller animals, their population sizes. So as much as people love frogs, snakes absolutely love frogs, but they're a massive food item. But our introduced pests, particularly our rats and mice, they are controlled very heavily by our snakes. And if we're able to lose all of our snakes, the same as if we were to lose all of our spiders, we can have an influx of stuff we do not want in huge numbers. But they'll also, I get tigers who are catching, eating blackbirds and starlings, all these introduced bird species who don't tend to do as well at managing where they nest to deal with a tiger snake who's capable of climbing up a tree and things like that. But if we look at it in terms of the agricultural industry, for crop farmers, they're worth a huge amount of money, thousands if not millions of dollars a year for the industry in controlling those rodents in those crop areas and therefore reducing loss of crop. So most farmers who grow crops really should love having snakes around. A lot of them don't, but hopefully will be, as we're moving forward and the mindsets are changing, and hopefully it continues to head that way.
So just a really important message. You see a snake, the best thing to do is to give it space.
Correct. Yeah, the only dangerous snake is one when you interact with it. People who get bitten by snakes, for the most part, there are accidental bites, but you are still interacting with them, but you're not intending to. But I think it's roughly 80–85% of bites are people trying to catch or kill that snake. Whether they had good intentions or bad ones, they've put themselves in a position where they are not trained and they could end up in the hospital or die. We do have the top 10 most venomous snakes in the world in Australia, and that's just on toxicity, not on danger level. But if an eastern brown snake's in your backyard and you decide you're going to go either try and move it yourself or worse, kill it, which is illegal and very cruel, there's a very high chance you will get bitten and you're going to have to spend the next few days in hospital. I guarantee your kids or your partner is not going to enjoy that. So if we leave them alone, they become completely non-issue.
Now, in the unfortunate incident that you are actually bitten by a snake, what should you do? What shouldn't you do?
Don't run around. So basically we need to, if you get bitten by any snake in Australia, regardless of whether or not you think it's non-venomous or venomous, in Victoria, basically going to guarantee it's going to be venomous. You need to, snake bite first aid is a pressure immobilisation technique, which is a pressure bandage wrapped around the limb and things like that. There's obviously more specifics to that, but really worth everyone, I think, knowing snake bite first aid. I obviously carry a fair few bandages in my car constantly. For good reason. I'm obviously choosing to interact with those animals, but if you have them in your house or maybe your car, if you're going bushwalking, really handy to have in your backpack those pressure immobilisation bandages. But the most important part other than that, and calling the ambos obviously, that's the big one, is keeping yourself calm and still. Our venom from our snakes travels through the lymphatic system, so anyone who knows what lymphatic system, it's moved by movement of the body as opposed to our bloodstream, which everyone seems to think it travels through the bloodstream. It doesn't. So the pressure mobilisation technique stops the lymphatic system moving, and if you're not moving yourself, hopefully you're more or less holding that venom where you got bitten. So let's say I get bitten on the hands. If I was to be calm, sit down, wrap that, there's a high chance I'm going to be able to get to the hospital, ambos, doctors, and that venom is not going to have got up to my internal organs and started causing the dramas that they can. And yeah, that's the most important thing, is to stay calm, know your snake bite first aid, which I know you guys have that lovely magnet, which is fantastic, and calling ambos. And if can't call an ambo, if there's someone to drive you, but please don't drive yourself to the hospital. That's
Well, you're moving, aren't you? Really moving.
You're moving, and some venom will make you pass out and do all sorts of stuff. So obviously, if you're driving a motor vehicle, not ideal.
Now, if you don't have a copy of the snake magnet, please call the office, because we do have plenty of snake magnets there, and we believe that they're a really handy thing for you to have on your fridge. Now, that information you've just given us about a snake bite now, I want people to think about not just the fact that you're in Sunbury and you might encounter a snake in Sunbury. We know that, especially over the last 6 months, we've all been locked down. We haven't been able to get out to parks and enjoy the environment. So, and I actually think over this summer we're going to see a lot more people that have started to enjoy our environment and what Victoria and Australia has to offer. So the most important thing is to have that information, and that's a really handy tip. If you are out and you're walking and you're in places like the Grampians or wherever you are, where you're likely to encounter some sort of a snake, it's not hard or not a bad idea just to have a bandage on you just in case the worst thing happens. But the best thing is to just back off and take it easy. Ben, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Now,
likewise.
If you do encounter a snake in Sunbury, the Massey Rangers, this is the guy to call, Ben. Wealth of information about snakes, very conscious about what we should be doing with them, how we should be handling them, and has a lot of information that actually can help you and educate you. They are a very important species in our food chain group, as Ben's explained. So I think this is a great opportunity for people to be a little bit more informed, and I thank you all for listening. Taylor, thank you. And Ben, thank you.
Thanks guys, it's been a pleasure.